What do you get when investigative journalism meets reality TV? A Seat with Chris Hansen. I'm Leah, feeling curious today and ready to dig into a story with real layers.
I'm Garrett, intrigued and, totally ready to dive into the wild world of investigative journalism and what it looks like when the cameras roll.
Today's topic, Chris Hansen and the sting operation legacy.
Okay, quick story. I remember the first time I watched To Catch a Predator. I was flipping channels and landed on this quiet, suburban living room where a guy walks in thinking he is meeting a minor, and then Chris Hansen steps out and says, "Why don't you have a seat?" I was glued. The setup, the decoy chat logs, the hidden cameras, and then that confrontation where the questions got very direct all hooked me. It made me curious about how these sting operations actually work and where the line between policing and journalism falls. That night sparked a whole interest in how investigations get built and why a good interview can change a story's tone.
Let's set the scene with some basics. A sting operation is a planned deception designed to catch someone committing a crime. Think undercover decoys, controlled meeting locations, and careful evidence collection. An online predator is someone who uses the internet to groom or exploit minors, often through chats that escalate to requests for in-person meetings. Chris Hansen is an American television presenter and journalist who became widely known on Dateline NBC, a primetime news magazine. He later expanded to YouTube and streaming. The big turning point was To Catch a Predator, where decoys posed as minors, suspects showed up to a house wired with cameras, and Hansen conducted a confrontational interview. Often, local police were waiting outside.
That format hit culture hard. It turned internet safety into something vivid. You could see the transcripts, the planning, the walk to the door, and then this calm but firm questioning. It made a lot of parents aware of grooming tactics, which are step-by-step trust-building moves that offenders use. And it put a wordless fear into a lot of would-be offenders, because suddenly there was the chance you were not meeting a kid, but a camera crew and a detective. The catchphrase, "Why don't you have a seat?" became internet shorthand for accountability.
Zooming back to the early years. Chris Hansen grew up in Michigan and says he was inspired at 14 by the 1975 disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, the Teamsters leader whose case drew massive FBI attention in Detroit. He studied at Michigan State University and started reporting while still a student at YLX in Lansing, which is an NBC affiliate. Through the 1980s, he worked in Tampa and Detroit newsrooms, including WDIV in Detroit, as an investigative reporter. In the 1990s, he joined NBC's national lineup with a short-lived program hosted by Tom Brokaw and Katie Couric. Brokaw is a legendary NBC nightly news anchor, and Couric is a well-known morning show and news anchor. That path led him to Dateline NBC, where he took on big, complex stories.
Those Dateline years were not just about Predator. He covered the Oklahoma City bombing, the Unabomber case, the TWA Flight 800 disaster, and did undercover pieces on Indian child slave labor and counterfeit prescription drugs in China. He also worked on exclusive about the Air France Flight 8969 hijacking and did stress tests on airport security that pushed the Federal Aviation Administration to review policies. After 9/11, he produced reporting on Al-Qaeda networks, including an expose on a group trying to buy missiles and nuclear components. So the toolkit for undercover work and complex sourcing was already there before the stings that made him a household name.
Then came To Catch a Predator from 2004 to 2007. Early on, there was collaboration with Perverted Justice, a volunteer group that posed as minors online. The show used sting houses with hidden cameras. Suspects arrived for what they thought was a meeting with a minor. Then Hansen conducted an interview, sometimes followed by an arrest by local police waiting nearby. Dateline also spun off versions like To Catch a Con Man and To Catch an ID Thief, using the same template to expose fraud. Public response was huge. The format drew massive curiosity and sparked debates about methods and ethics.
Culturally, it was everywhere. He had a cameo on 30 Rock, and parodies rolled in, South Park, The Boondocks, and later he voiced himself in The Simpsons. That tells you the idea had crossed over from news to pop culture archetype. At the same time, the ethical questions got loud. Entrapment, in simple terms, when law enforcement induces someone to commit a crime they otherwise would not commit, was a frequent talking point. To be clear, the show's defenders argued these were people initiating explicit chats and choosing to show up. That tension between exposure and due process never fully went away. It is part of the genre.
After NBC ended his contract in 2013, he pivoted. He hosted Killer Instinct on Investigation Discovery, a true crime cable network, focusing on homicide cases. In 2015, he tried to independently launch Hansen vs. Predator through Kickstarter, aiming for $400,000, but raising $89,000. There were later donor complaints online about undelivered memorabilia, which remained disputed, and a separate larceny case over a bounced check connected to promotional items that was later dropped. The core idea survived, though. Hansen vs. Predator became a recurring segment on the syndicated show Crime Watch Daily. Syndicated means a show is sold to many local stations rather than airing on one network. Ratings bumped when he joined, including gains among younger women viewers.
Then came the digital shift. In 2019, he launched a YouTube channel called Have a Seat with Chris Hansen, where he posted interviews and weekly podcasts. One big arc covered allegations against YouTuber James Jackson, better known as Onision, including interviews with accusers. Those were allegations, not court findings. In January 2020, he tried an in-person interview at Jackson's house. Police were called, but took no action against Hansen. Jackson filed a lawsuit the next day, then moved to dismiss it a day later. The court granted the dismissal. Around the same time, Hansen co-founded a streaming service called True Blue, a true crime platform. He later launched Takedown with Chris Hansen there in 2022. On that series, he had more creative control, even down to tone and language, and coordinated closely with local law enforcement, showing more of the logistics behind the scenes.
Alongside the highs, there were personal and legal setbacks. Media reported he was evicted from a New York apartment in early 2019 after rent issues, and that same month he turned himself in on the bounced check case we mentioned. Again, those charges were dropped. In 2021, he missed a court date tied to a Michigan sting case and a warrant was issued. He turned himself in, called it a misunderstanding, and it got resolved. On the awards side, he is highly decorated, 10 Emmy Awards, which honor excellence in television, 5 Edward R. Murrow Awards, which recognize outstanding journalism, plus Clarion, IRE, and Overseas Press Club honors. He also received the KidSafe Foundation's Child Advocate of the Year in 2015 for his work raising awareness about online predators.
More recently, he has kept adapting to where kids and predators actually interact online. In 2026, he released Dangerous Games, Investigating Roblox, a Chris Hansen special on True Blue. Roblox is a massive user-generated gaming platform with many young players. The special looked at safety gaps with interviews from victims, law enforcement, and a YouTuber named Schlepp, who had been banned from Roblox after vigilante-style investigations. That collaboration highlighted the friction between creator-led stings and formal policing. And coming up in the film world, A24 is set to release Primetime, directed by Lance Oppenheim, with Robert Pattinson portraying Hansen. It focuses on the origins of To Catch a Predator and the spectacle and ethics around it.
That keeps the template in motion. You have the decoy communications, the controlled space, the interview, and often a handoff to police. It has been remixed from broadcast to syndication to YouTube and now to streaming TV and even film. He also popped up across talk shows over the years, from comedy late night to political commentary programs. That range shows how the topic sits at the crossroads of safety, spectacle, and media ethics. The durability comes from the reveal moment. People want to see hidden intent exposed, but the questions about process and fairness sit right beside it.
So his legacy is twofold. First, he helped normalize a hybrid model where journalism, citizen activism, and policing intersect. That is powerful but complicated. Second, he built a brand that followed audiences across platforms, from Dateline to a syndicated newsroom to a YouTube playlist to a streaming service. Whether you see it as accountability journalism or reality-style entertainment, it has had staying power few investigative formats pull off.
Here is the big question. Does Hansen's confrontational style blur the line between journalism and entertainment? I wonder about entrapment risk. Even if that is a technical legal term about inducing a crime, some viewers still feel the setup pressures people into choices. And then chain of custody comes to mind, which is the careful documentation of evidence from collection to court. When media helps run an operation, record keeping and procedure can get messy. Why lean into the confrontation on camera if the goal is just to protect kids? Could the cameras escalate things or even harm a future prosecution?
I hear that, and here is why I still think it serves a public interest. The confrontations, when done with law enforcement coordination, are more like a documentation phase. The decoys do not coerce. Suspects initiate explicit chats and choose to show up, which is not entrapment under the usual definition. The on-camera moment educates parents about grooming patterns in a way lectures rarely do. It is specific and undeniable, and there are guardrails when police departments run the criminal side. Journalists capture context, but police handle evidence and arrests. Sensational, sure, but the visibility deters and informs. In a space where crimes happen online and in private, light matters.
That makes sense, though I still worry about collateral effects. The presence of cameras can change behavior, and the Michigan court mix-up shows how quickly logistics become legal headlines. Why not keep the format but slow the public release until prosecutors clear cases?
Totally fair. I think the streaming era actually helps here. On Takedown with Chris Hansen, he had more control and could coordinate timing with local agencies, and the grittier, sometimes unfiltered tone is about transparency. It shows process, not just the gotcha. If editorial calendars and law enforcement timelines align, you get impact without tripping over cases. The balance is tough, but the more it resembles a joint operation with clear lanes, the safer it is legally and ethically.
Pop culture kept the conversation going. There was that cameo on 30 Rock, the South Park and Boondocks parodies, and then he voiced himself on The Simpsons. Those references act like cultural shorthand. A single line about having a seat tells the whole story. And with prime time on the way at A24, with Lance Oppenheim directing and Robert Pattinson stepping into the role, we will see a dramatized unpacking of how this all began and why it still grips people. What if NBC had renewed Hansen's contract in 2013? I picture a continued primetime Sting franchise with big network resources. Standards and legal teams would likely have tightened procedures even more. Maybe decoy operations would have leaned into new tech platforms earlier, like messaging apps, with stronger evidence protocols. The trade-off could be creative limits. Network notes can soften edges. But with that reach, the safety messaging might have scaled faster, especially for parents who still mainly watched broadcast TV back then.
I could see that, and here is another angle. If Predator-style stings had stayed in prime time, the rise of independent YouTube catchers might have been smaller because the brand authority would sit on NBC nights. Hansen might not have built True Blue, which means we might not get something like the Roblox special in that exact form. On the flip side, staying with NBC could have prevented some of the financial and legal turbulence you get when you go independent. Networks have legal buffers and payrolls, but direct audience connection would be weaker. No weekly have-a-seat uploads, fewer Q&A vibes. Would the format have burned out under network repetition or stayed fresh with big budgets? That is the coin toss.
Why do you think the format might have risked burning out on network TV?
Because primetime needs constant escalation. Bigger stings, more shocking reveals, tighter ad breaks. That pressure can push a show to prioritize spectacle over nuance. Streaming and YouTube let the story breathe. They can show setup, paperwork, even the quiet moments that make it feel real. On a network, the cadence is faster, and after a few seasons, sameness can creep in unless you reinvent, which carries its own risks.
Stay curious and stay informed. I'm Leah.
And I'm Garrett. Until next time.